Hello, and welcome to Defending Your IBM I Against Malware. Today's webinar is sponsored by Precisely and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Scott Becker. I'm from Actual Tech Media, and I'm excited to be your moderator for this special event. Now, before we get to today's great content, we do have a few housekeeping items that will help you get the most out of this session. First off, we want this to be an informative event for you, so we encourage any questions in the questions box in our webinar control panel. Not only will we have team members responding to questions during the live event, but we'll also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the presentation where we'll discuss in greater detail some of the top questions that you ask. That Q&A panel is also the place to let us know about any technical issues you might be experiencing. A browser refresh will fix most audio, video, and slide advancement issues, but if that doesn't work, let us know in the Q&A and we'll provide further technical assistance. Second, in the handouts section of your webinar control panel, you'll find that we're offering several resources. There's a link for getting started with Precisely. There's also a link to the Gorilla Guide Book Club where you can get access to Actual Tech Media's great printed resources on technology topics, as well as a link to the ATM Event Center, which has our calendar of upcoming events. So I encourage you to access those resources now and share them with your friends and colleagues. Third, at the end of this webinar event, we will be awarding a $300 Amazon gift card to one lucky registrant. Of course, you must be in attendance during the live event to qualify for the prize. Official terms and conditions of today's prize drawing can also be found in your handout section. Just scroll to the bottom and you'll find the prize terms and conditions link there. Finally, one of the best benefits of this event is the opportunity to ask a question of our expert presenters. So to help encourage your questions, we have a special additional prize for you. That's another Amazon gift card, this one for $50 for the best question. At the end of the event, we'll look at all the questions, pick out the very best one, and contact that prize winner. And with that, let's get to today's fantastic content. It is my pleasure to introduce you to our presenters today. We have Bill Hammond, who's Director of Product Marketing at Precisely, and Gabrielle Meyer-Levy, Sales Director for Security Products at Precisely. So I am going to turn things over to Bill to get.
Thanks to all of you for attending. And as you saw from the title, I mean, we're going to focus today on defending your IBM against malware. And I think the biggest point that I want to make before I turn it over to Gabrielle to talk in some detail about some of these things is kind of the nature of the threat. You know, the situation is consistently getting worse and evolving. It's not yesterday's problem. So I think we need to think about it a little bit differently than maybe we have in the past. You know, the nature of these threats has really changed, and we're going to talk a little bit about that and what today's landscape looks like. You know, I think the changes and the new environment that we've started to live in does require some shift in thinking about how you go to approach the solution or really the mitigation of this risk that exists with malware, more specifically ransomware. So, you know, we need to understand how these threats work to be able to protect against them as best we can, even though, you know, as best we can may not be perfect. You know, you can only do as much as you can. So want to make sure that we're giving you the information you need to make good decisions about your IBM environment and the security challenges that are coming from some of these new threats. So, you know, it does require effort on the part of our customers and our IBM users here to make sure that they stay informed about these changes and how the threat landscape continues to evolve. So when we look today at the malware and ransomware, maybe specifically, you know, we need to recognize it's not just one thing. It's a growing range of different types of attacks, and the actual even nature of the business model around this is changing. I'll get to that in a slide or two, but essentially the idea of ransomware is it's almost being productized. You know, it's being marketed and offered by a range of companies. It's become more of an organized sort of thing. It's not, you know, yesterday's bad actor, you know, in a basement somewhere seeing if he can hack into your system. It's very much become more organized and more deliberate. You know, there's even a ransomware as a service that's sprung up. So this is becoming almost, you know, productized, like I said, supported by some very efficient business practices that are out there. It's very much a highly evolving threat. And bottom line is, it's very easy to access for a lot of people. It's broadly marketed. It's making people money, which is going to draw even more people to it, and the scale just increases. So, bottom line, you're not up against that, one bad actor in a basement or somebody that's got a grudge. This is very much a business model that has evolved and started to take hold in this space. Today's malware attack, and again, ransomware, maybe more specifically, has a couple of characteristics about it that we see. I mean, they're actively guided and executed. These are not sort of random things. There's a process that these follow. It's not just a standard one-off approach, though. It's very much a customizable, maybe a good word to use, way of doing it. The tools out there help these people do that kind of stuff. So it can be, even though there's reusable tools and all, like I said, productized sort of things, it is very easy to customize it, and how you time it and what you do with it is very, very unique in each individual circumstance. It's very hard to detect. Today's tools are almost indistinguishable from just normal activity, and it just can sit out there for a while and look normal, but then it can be activated and provide some pretty damaging consequences. So the goal of it all is, getting money. That's why it's become so productized and business model building, springing up around it, because there's monetary rewards that are available, and people have shown that they can turn this malware into money. And so, ransomware is a huge piece of how they're doing that. So there are people in the world are investing in their skills about how to deploy these tools and how to be successful in these kind of efforts. So, again, the threat landscape continues to change and get more dangerous. Cryptocurrency is another piece of this. It provides the mechanism, the monetary mechanism for payments of these, the ransomware in particular, about how the money's going to change hands and how they monetize the malware and the ransomware. And obviously the cryptocurrencies has some advantages in terms of the anonymity of it. Unmarked bills for the 21st century is sort of a way to look at it. So with that being sort of the anatomy of the attack, what's the business model I keep referring to? Well, here's a chart that does a really good job of explaining it. There are people out there that are developing these ransomware tools. That's kind of at the top of the pyramid there, and they take a cut of the action, if you want to call it that. But then the third-party partners level, these are the people that are out there actually trying actively to penetrate your systems and get this malware onto your systems, and ultimately be able to generate a ransomware attack against you, and then monetize that with the cryptocurrency that we talked about on the prior slide. And these percentages are a guesstimate, or they're estimates from a lot of different experts in this space. But the bottom line here is it's actually sort of a regular repeating model where you have somebody developing the software, people then use that software, and money is kicked upstairs to the ultimate creator of the software, the developer, by these, essentially the attackers, the third-party planners, and all of us are the targets of that activity. So it has become very much like a normal business model where people buy a good, use it to generate profit. These ransomware partners, their job is to get onto your networks. And a lot of, yesterday's security best practices just aren't going to be enough to lock your system down. So that's why we say that, the threat is evolving, the threat's changing, and we need to take advantage of this, the recognition of that change to do some things differently. Yesterday, like I said, yesterday's best practices are just not enough, and you need to really arm yourself with different approaches in today's world to try to protect yourself as much as possible against the risk of malware and ransomware. And scanning for it, trying to remediate it after the fact is not as effective as trying to prevent it in the first place. So just monitoring and looking for it and doing scans for known malware things It's not that they don't have any place at all, but we would like to move the conversation. How do I prevent it from getting on my systems in the first place? One of the things that is clearly part of this is that multi-layered defense is really going to be required. So the next generation way of looking at this, you need to have multiple areas of protection, multiple tools deployed, understanding where your critical assets are, what they're not, thinking about how things like your data protection backups, how they're stored, are they air-gapped from the rest of your network, and things like that. And some of the existing security tools you may have been using, while not completely, ineffective, may be not as effective as some newer approaches or some newer ways of layering these things together. So applying them in a new context is really what we're suggesting here. And layering your defense is having not just, for example, MFA, but access control issues and encryption and deploying all these things together, we think is the new way of trying to protect yourself as much as possible against the type of current day malware attacks that we are continuing to see. So with that as kind of a preamble of, hey, the world is changing and things are a little different, I'm going to turn it over to Gabriel now, and he's going to talk through some of the recommendations and some of the observations really we have of what's going on in the market. So, Gabriel, I'll hand it off to you to start talking to us about malware protection and more of a what do you do stance.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thanks for that, Bill. Yeah, that's a great overview, and I feel like we've we're jumping into the deep end of the pool here. Obviously, these things have been around for a while, but they haven't been around quite in the way that they are now. I wanted to expand upon, Bill, you mentioned the need for multi-layered defense. And that of course, that's been around since time immemorial, different ways of defending. I wanted to kind of expand on that a bit and just explain what we mean and why we bring that up. We don't particularly like to use buzzwords here at Precisely. If we're going to say something, we want there to be a practical, timely reason for talking about and thinking about things in this way. So in order to give you all a sense of where these multiple layers are coming from, I wanted to just, and here you see the anatomy of a ransomware attack. And this, of course, is a very simplistic diagram. I'm sure we all know the FBI now is tracking hundreds of different types and flavors of ransomware, okay? But just to give us a little bit of a sense of what the attack is, and what we'll see when we kind of peel the onion back a little bit, is that the ransomware attack itself has many layers, okay? And Bill alluded to some of them. So that's where we're coming with this multi-layer defense. Is the attack has a lot of moving pieces, so the defense needs to kind of meet the attack. In other words, if they were just trying to do one thing, then we could just defend against that one thing. But since there's kind of multiple different, chess games going on all at once here, so that's what we mean by multi-layer defense. We want to meet the attack the way that it's attacking us. All right. So let's go through some of these. And this, by the way, this is one of my great rules in security is you can't secure what you don't understand, right? And this is kind of the mistake people make, is they try to secure stuff before they've really understood what's going on. So if we want to secure against malware, and in particular, I'll focus mostly on ransomware on this call, just because that's where we're seeing so much activity right now. We need to understand. We need to understand how these threats work. We need to understand where on the surface we have to make some changes, not just in what we do, but also in how we think about these things. So that's what we mean by multi-layer defense. There's a lot of moving pieces to malware and to ransomware, and so we're going to try to layer we're going to try to add some layers that stop those pieces. Okay, so let's go on. This is just a kind of a basic diagram from Gartner. Nothing too fancy, but we want to specifically call out what this means for the IBM I. Okay, like Bill said, you saw that a few slides ago. The ransomware itself isn't in charge of getting on the system, right? There's third-party malicious actor channels whose job it is to breach the system and get the ransomware onto the system, right? And if you're on this call, it's very likely that at least most of you don't have responsibility for the overall network hygiene of your entire organization, right? You're probably just trying to figure out how to avoid having a breach occur or kind of be contagious, be infected into your IBM I environment. So while you may not be in a position to create that ultimate perimeter around your organization, and frankly, almost no one is these days. But what we can do is figure out what the breach means for IBM I, and for the most part, these ransomware attacks aren't specifically targeting IBM I per se. There are some I don't want to make it sound like that it never happens. There are some advanced persistent threats out there that do specifically go after the IBM I. That's probably a topic we can cover on another webinar. But for the purposes of malware and ransomware, stuff that's out there in the wild, your main concern is going to be your IFS directory. Okay, the IFS directory, for those of you who don't know, is the integrated file system that IBM added to the IBM I. So it's a Unix-like file system. It acts and behaves like just about any other storage facility out there. So while we haven't seen any malware ransomware that specifically targets the kind of the inner kernel of the IBM I and the RPG code, but the IFS directory is extremely vulnerable. Okay, the IFS directory is used by the OS. It may be used by some of your applications. Even if you don't know that you're using it, there could be some network shares that are open without your knowledge. So the IFS is really the big point of vulnerability on the IBM I when we're talking about ransomware and malware. Okay, so like we said, so like Bill said, well, shouldn't security best practices cover this? Well, the thing is those security best practices, those third-party malicious hacker channels, or I shouldn't really call them hacker, they're the third-party malicious thieves, cyber criminals. They know all those best practices. They make all they do day and night is figure out ways to work around those best practices, right? So we're not saying don't do them. You should do them. Okay, it will help you. You're less likely to experience this, but that can't be your whole strategy. In fact, it shouldn't even be most of your strategy, because those are all things your organization's probably doing on some level. Okay, so yes, you need to implement best practices for the IBM I, but there's more to it than that. So, for example, here, we talk about advanced MFA. I'll show you a little bit about what we mean by that. All right, so first of all, even just regular MFA, if you implement just regular old MFA on Telnet for the IBM I, that's already really good. Okay, because that means that because how hard is it? We're at this point in the security event, we have to assume vulnerability, not impregnability, right? So your network's been breached, okay? So that means that malicious actors are out there sniffing network traffic. Well, how hard is it to sniff an IBM I username and password, right? It's not that hard, right? So you can assume if your network's been breached, it is safe to assume that IBM I credentials have been compromised. So best practice MFA, just regular old MFA, we'll get to advanced MFA in a moment, but just regular old MFA is still a really good practice, right? Because that will prevent those stolen credentials from leading to a system breach, okay? Especially if those stolen credentials happen to be, the credentials of a sysadmin, all right? So MFA is your best bet to keep this malicious code and ransomware activity off of the eye. All right, we're assuming it's on the network somewhere, but MFA is a great and let's just dig in a little bit what we mean by advanced MFA. Okay, usually when we talk about MFA, people think, oh, that's Telnet, right? It's just authenticating when I log in. Advanced MFA actually allows you to have multi-factor authentication calls on all sorts of stuff, including FTP and ODBC, of course, 5250 as well. Most importantly for the topic we're talking about is that it allows you to protect the net server and the file shares and the Ifs Directory. Okay, so this advanced MFA, you're leveraging the exit point security and adding an MFA call on top of that. And what ends up happening is if there's here, let's see. Yeah. So back to this slide. So if there's a malware actor who either it could be a person or it could be just the ransomware is burrowing through the network and it's looking for places to make trouble, right? So it's not enough to just lock down telnet access, even though, of course, that's great. But here what we're doing is we're putting an MFA blocker or a bouncer, if you will, in front of the network shares, in front of the Ifs directory. So now that malware can't get in, right? Because the malware is going to try to get in, and it's going to get prompted for an MFA call. You don't even for that use case, you don't even need MFA. Even just a challenge question would keep them off. Okay, so we're not talking about just MFA for telnet and for login. Advanced MFA can also secure the IFS and the network shares. All right, and that's the best way. Now, you can also reduce the threat surface, right? Because what the way ransomware attacks work is, they've got some of those credentials, right? So now they're going to try to elevate their privileges of the credentials, right? So a tool such as elevated authority management comes in and makes that reduces the threat surface for elevated privileges very radically, right? Because with a tool like that, anybody who needs to do anything that requires elevated privileges, they've got a separate workflow that they've got to go through. They've got to, they have to swap, or they have to do inherited authority, or whatever the workflow is. It's not something that that your average malicious actor is going to be able to access. And people say, well, what about insider threats? Okay, it's a good point. It's true. If you have an insider that's and I'm not just talking about a purloined credential, right? That's talking about an inside actor that, yes, that is a very serious thing. That's a bigger problem than just having ransomware, right? That means you have a malicious actor who has inside knowledge and inside access to your organization. So yeah, that's an even bigger problem that can happen. But again, if you manage your privileges and manage elevated authority, the threat surface reduces very, very dramatically, not just for ransomware, but also for those insider threats. Now, I want to make one last point on this. We don't have to belabor this, but ransomware does stuff on your system. It behaves in a certain way. It starts making all these encrypted files, a lot of them, really quick. So if your organization has a SIM, next generation SIM, whether it's QRadar or Splunk or Logarithm or any of the others, those tools probably already have some malware detection algorithms built in, specifically for ransomware. And if they don't, we can actually help you design those. So integrating to a SIM is also a really great way to detect these kind of abnormal, disconcerting behavior that would indicate that there's a breach, indicate that ransomware has gotten in. So again, you look at all this stuff and go, wow, it's all these multiple layers. Well, each one of them is coming in to try and defend against a different layer of the attack. So the attack is multi-layered, so therefore our defense is multi-layered. I hope that makes sense. Let me just pause for a second and see if we had any questions.
Gabrielle, I'm looking at the Q&A box here. One question is, when you talk about telnet, are you referring to flat telnet, non-IBM client access telnet, such as Mocha?
Yeah, I just meant standard 5250 screen emulation. There, you can do, you can get more intricate and kind of more sophisticated with how you want to lock down telnet access. But for the purposes of this conversation, and we're happy to follow up with a call one-on-one, get a little deeper into the weeds. But for the purpose of this conversation, I just meant 5250 access when
right.
sysadmin comes in, signs in. That's it. Just that, and that's not advanced MFA. That doesn't give you all of the stuff we're talking about here. But still, that's a great first step. I mean, if there was one thing that you could do, one piece of this puzzle that you could add, I think MFA, even just basic MFA would be a great first step.
Okay. One other one real quick. I think it's a pretty quick answer. I think it's related to your discussion on IFS as the part of the IBM I that gets infected. But the question was, are we assuming that malware can populate the IBM I sign-on server?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I wasn't assuming that, even though I'd love to. That's probably something for some of our more technical resources to look at. I was just talking about a case where there's an open share. In other words, where where network share has been open. Maybe you knew about it, maybe you didn't. Maybe it has a root access, maybe it doesn't. I'm just kind of keeping it simple here. It's a good point. I don't know the answer to that. Bill, can you make a note of that? Maybe we can follow up with them. I think that
we absolutely do, and we'll follow up with people that have asked questions. Hopefully, we'll get to many of them during the course of the conversation here. But if we don't, we follow up after the fact. So we'll do that, Gabrielle. Thanks.
Okay, terrific. Great question. The questions are the best part of these things, so please keep them coming. And then, okay, so this is kind of, that was the perfect segue. Is my IBM I really at risk? So again, the IBM I is very securable, okay, but it doesn't come that way. It doesn't come that way out of the box. There really needs to, you really have to have a security program for it, especially for these things that involve outside access. And people say, well, my IBM I isn't really, it could be that your organization has just got the IBM I off to the side, behind a million firewalls, and all it's doing is some little HR process. And, you might even have, there are some customers of ours that I, won't name, that even have IBM I's air-gapped. In other words, they're not even on the network. Someone has to go into a room and do something with it, and then they come out of the room and they put the flat. So sure, that can happen sometimes. The vast majority of our customers today who are actively using the IBM I, even if it's not their main focus, the IBM I is part of your network. It's part of your security exposure. There's a little bit of security through obscurity, right? Because it's not as actively targeted as some of the other ones. But you have to secure it. It has to, and this might not be your job. You might just be the system administrator. That's okay. So you can work with your company's security team to put together. And this is kind of what we're trying to, kind of the purpose of this call is to try to say is like, what you don't want is for some, for some security analyst who's never even been on the IBMI and doesn't know what it works to come to you with a security program that they want you to, what's better for our customers is if you all come with a plan, you already know what malware and ransomware, what those, you've already done some risk analysis, you already have some best practices, you already have some recommendations, and then that way you can lead the discussion instead of, I don't know, kind of being, thrown some memo at the end of some process that you weren't part of. So if the IBMI isn't top of mind for your organization's security team, please don't. Some people think, well, great, it's not my job, they're not bugging me, so I've got other things to do. Don't wait for them to come to you with their, well-intentioned but misinformed security scheme for the IBMI. Get in there and, ask for a meeting, ask for some resources to do a little bit of an assessment. If you are in a position to at least start the conversation, then you'll be able to make sure that that the IBMI is an appropriate part of your organization's security strategy. Because whether your security team knows it or not, IBMI, that IBMI is being queried. It's being pinged all the time within your network. And so even though it's true, we don't know of any current IBMI malware. I shouldn't say we don't know of any ransomware. Let's put it that way. Maybe that's a better way to put it. We don't know of any current ransomware that targets the IBMI proper, the actual iOS. Okay, but like we said, the IFS can be infected. An infected object can be stored on the IFS. And then the malware can enter through an infected workstation too, if the drive is mapped. So those are the two main things. And some of you on the call are like, well, great, I'll just go and fix that. It's not enough to fix it. You have to have some sort of a report, some sort of an ongoing automated workflow where you can sign off on this and tell whoever it is within your management within your management tree that your shares are correctly guarded against. And of course, a little bit later in the call, Bill will explain how Precisely can help you with that. But some of it, even before you talk to us, some of it's just knowing for yourself where the risks are and what ransomware and malware is trying to exploit when it comes to the IBMI. So if I wanted to kind of summarize what we've been talking about in a way that's maybe just kind of a little easier to think about is kind of at the top use case we got full on ransomware defense, all those different arrows that we showed you, all the different moving pieces. Okay, it includes reporting and alerting and integration with the SIM, multi-factor authentication and exit point security that doesn't just protect the telnet, but also FTP, ODBC, and especially those shared drives in the IFS directory. So that's kind of full on ransomware defense. If you or your organization doesn't have an appetite for the whole kit and caboodle, so we would just recommend starting with advanced MFA. So again, that's more than just telnet. It's also ODBC and FTP, and the IFS directory as well. And on the other hand, if your organization isn't even ready for that, and they just the very minimum that that we recommend as a starting point is you should at least get the IBMI on the roadmap for your whatever MFA initiative your organization is already going through. Okay, that will give you some degree of protection from these things. Not as much as being able to lock down all those exit points and have an MFA call in front of the shared. Not as much as all the other stuff, but still, just basic MFA is a good place to start as well. So let's talk about, well, how would we build a multi-layered defense here? So like we've said, MFA does a lot of things. Advanced MFA, this is going to protect you against credential theft and a lot of different. We alluded to this earlier. If your network is compromised, and it's safe to assume for the sake of this conversation that it is. If your network's compromised, that means that your IBMI is at risk, okay? Because those credentials, those usernames and passwords, they're flying all over the network all the time, okay? And there's no way to put that genie back in the bottle, right? People need access to the I for all sorts of reasons. People, applications, so that has to continue. You can't really change that so much. But what you can do is you can add another factor. And obviously we all know about this stuff. We use this on our phones. We use it for our even our pool filters now have MFA you can add. But not all of us are using it on the IBMI, and it's actually a good deal more complicated to integrate it on the IBMI. But it's worth it, because once you realize that pretty much any time the network is compromised, the IBMI is at risk, adding that additional factor can really help. And it's not just that it protects access. It's also you'll see a lot more password login attempts failing. It's also useful information to track down a threat in real time. Okay, so this, I know we all know what multi-factor authentication is, but think about how we're applying it to this use case, in particular ransomware and malware defense on the IBMI. It's actually really does add a very strong level of protection. This is why we recommend this as the first step, as the place to start. So it's not just about that, though. Obviously you want to have good practices in place for elevated authority and privileged management. If you're in a position to start implementing access control on the exit points, there's a lot of stuff you can do to lock down the system, a lot of creative ways where you can also not just locking down the system, but monitoring the system. Okay, this is where we alluded to briefly the issue of insider threats, right? So that's a bigger hole. That's something even harder to defend against than these ransomware and malware attacks. But it can be done. There are ways you can add workflows that involve screen scraping and four eyes approval, and you can, if there's extremely sensitive objects that really nobody should be touching in a prod environment, there's ways to audit access to that. So there's really a whole ton of stuff that you can do, and we don't want to sort of overwhelm everyone with all the the 1,001 things. What we're really trying to show you here is there's a lot of different layers to this. And we do want to recommend starting out with the multi-factor piece if you're looking for where to start. But it ends up becoming a very interesting conversation about all of the different types of access, all of the different types of activity that are going on the IBMI, proving once again, right, you can't secure what you don't understand. So it's not just, and there isn't anyone in the world who understands what you do, right? So it's not just about people like me kind of giving you best practices. It's also about drilling down into how your business uses and leverages the IBMI. And that will then drive the security conversation. So let's go forward here. Yeah. So there are obviously, we all know about encryption and masking and data in rest and data in motion. Now, ransomware can still, in other words, the fact that you've got your data encrypted doesn't protect you from ransomware, right? Because that which can be encrypted can always be encrypted again, okay? But still, it's better. In other words, it's not if your encrypted data was compromised by a ransomware attack, that's still a lot better than if it wasn't encrypted, right? And there are even legal ramifications to that. You might not need to report a breach, a data breach anyway. You might not have to report a data breach if the data was encrypted, even if it was extracted off the system. But if it was encrypted, so it's kind of like that, encrypted storage drive that fell off the truck. The classic security case. So it's not enough to just encrypt your data at rest. It's not enough to encrypt your data in motion, but A, it helps, and B, and perhaps more importantly for the case of ransomware, you need to be on top of what's going on your system from an encryption perspective. In other words, you need to know which user IDs are allowed to encrypt stuff and which aren't. And if something's encrypting stuff that isn't supposed to, that should alert. That should raise red flags everywhere. If something is starting to, this is where kind of reporting, alerting, integration with the SIM can help. This is kind of the real time aspect of it. Nothing. There should be very, very, very clear. And this is hard. I know. I mean, it's easy for me to say on a call like this, but it's actually a lot harder than it sounds to know what's encrypted and what's not. You may have applications that are doing some encryption that you don't know about. And it's actually really important to go and do kind of a baseline data inventory of where your sensitive data is, where encrypted data is, where encrypted files come into the system from, you have to map all that stuff out. So, and for two reasons. One is, like best practices, things we've been saying for 10, 20 years now. But in terms of next generation, the ransomware is using encryption to extort you. It's an extortion scheme, right? Nice data you got there. It'd be a shame if something happened to it, right? So by having a good, solid encryption program in place, that not only that you're encrypting and masking data the way you should be, but just that you are actively monitoring encryption activity on the system, that is a really great step to protect against these kinds of ransomware and malware attacks. So let's see. I think I kind of made this point already here with the slide. Always be monitoring. What's a good way to put this? It's a journey. You're never like, okay, it's secure and we're done, right? Tomorrow you're going to have a new application project that's going to require that's going to create new security risks. That's going to change the security vulnerability surface in some way. So it's always a constant exploring. It's always a constant. But the hardest part, I don't think that's the hard part for most organizations that we talk to. Most organizations aren't. It happens sometimes, but for the most part, people aren't coming to us and saying, we've got a great security program in place, but now we've got this new application. We need help securing this new initiative. Most folks come to us and say, heck, I don't even know what's on my system. The person who was in charge of this retired, or we've got 20 years worth of, like, where do I even start? How do I even get to a baseline? So that's the hardest part. But once you get to that baseline, then you can proactively monitor, proactively prepare. You can even do some tabletop exercises. You can do an annual, an annual simulation of an event in preparation for an audit. There's lots of stuff you can do once you get to that baseline. Hard part is getting on that baseline. Once you get on the baseline, then it's just kind of an ongoing journey. And I think I made this point, no need to belabor it. Integration with SIM is a great way to add that real-time component. And the great thing about SIM projects for our customers is, a lot of times this is one of the things, this is the memo you get from corporate is, the IBMI is now within scope of our SIM initiative or whatever, right? So it's actually, and then, and a lot of folks go, oh, another project, right? But this is actually a good thing because it's so much better than getting that phone call from someone saying, we're going to need these we're going to need these 120 reports. We believe there might have been a breach, da, 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 da. If you can just integrate with the SIM, then it's their problem. They don't need you for that kind of stuff as much. They might if they see something really disconcerting and they don't really understand the IBMI as well as you do, they may need to come to you for help. But the SIM project is a great way to enable the security people to do their job without bugging you too much. So it's nowhere near, it's very complicated, a lot of different data sets, the data needs to be normal. There's a whole bunch of pieces to it. For the purposes of this call, I just want to say these SIM tools are great at detecting weird, unusual activity. And if you get the right data sets, like what we were saying before, that involve, creation of objects, encryption of objects, if you can get those data sets onto your SIM and get your, and your SIM may even already have tools for this for other platforms, such as Windows and Linux, well, great. You can just piggyback off the work they're already doing, and there's your ransomware alerting and reporting initiative right there. Okay, Bill, why don't we pause again for questions, and then I think I hand the mic back to you.
You do, yes. We have quite a few questions. Let me grab some. We probably aren't going to be able to get to all of them, but one thing, and I'll address it in a second, is a question about do we have any documents or value-add documents for the C-suite to help get buy-in?
I love that question.
We have a bunch of things, but I was actually going to announce we have a brand new ebook that's specifically on the subject and very much suitable for a C-level conversation. So I'll provide a link there in the next couple of slides. But so that's one we have. One that I don't know if you know off the top of your head or not, but the question is, can a good or reasonable MFA solution, I assume he's talking about our solution, be implemented using OS v7.1? I'm not sure what level of support we have.
Oh, I think so, but I don't know. Bill, we gotta make a note of that.
Right.
I should know that off the top of my head, but I don't. So.
Don't have the.
And even if I do, I've learned now. Even if I do know off the top of my head, I still don't say it because I've been wrong. I've thought that I knew, and then no, that was the other one. Right. So,
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Great question. Let's get back to them on that.
Okay. All right. Good. Let's press on. We'll reserve some time at the end to maybe hit some more of these questions that we have in the queue here. Okay. So, how precisely can help? One of the first things I want to say is that we have a ton of expertise on the security team here at Precisely with, people that have been in the IBMI space in general and the security space more specifically for a long time, longer than a bunch of us want to admit to. So, please help. We can help you just by, our expertise, things we've seen, help you work through, as Gabrielle pointed out. A lot of these issues are very much, what is your environment? What is your goals? What are your needs? So we've helped customers navigate through those waters before. So as a general statement, rely on the expertise that we can help provide for you. So reach out to us. We want to help. We want to help you navigate these waters. Our product offering here, our Assure Security product offering from IBMI, I'm not going to spend too much time on product stuff. It's not really a product commercial today. But we do have a lot of our tools and capabilities can be deployed against this problem, this idea that the best way to impact the risks of the ransomware threat that's out there today is to actually employ a multi-layered defense, use some of these tools, but be in a mode of I want to prevent it from ever getting on my system in the first place, as opposed to scanning and remediation once it gets there, kind of, solving the problem by finding it after it's already happened. We want to shift the conversation a little bit, left of that and talk about how we prevent it from ever happening in the first place. So preventing versus trying to mediate or solve after the fact. When you look at what our offering looks like, we like to talk about our Assure Security offering, being focused in a couple of different areas. Access control, we've got a number of elements there that we can help with. The monitoring piece, Gabrielle just talked a lot about some of the importance of monitoring. The data privacy, which is primarily around encryption and secure file transfer, which is about protecting the data that's in motion. Encryption for data at rest and secure file transfer capabilities for data that's in motion. And then on the far right side, you see what we've been talking about today, which is how you align these tools together to try to provide malware defense. And again, as Gabrielle pointed out, you don't have to do everything all at once, but securing access to the system, getting your elevated authorities in order so you don't have people that have elevated privileges, thereby increasing the risk that a ransomware attack could actually get to, really important data. The multi-factor authentication first step and the advanced MFA capabilities that we have there for that, those are important. The monitoring and reporting and the encryption pieces, again, we've talked about those together. But we have a lot of customers that are selecting some or all of these solutions under the malware defense kind of problem set here to help protect themselves against this sort of evolving threat that we see out there with malware and the vulnerability of the IBMI specifically with the IFS entry point. So each of these pieces we've sort of talked through already: System Access Manager, Elevated Authority, multi-factor, monitoring, reporting, and ensure encryption. And in order to get some of the questions, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this slide, but I just want the take-home message here to be that multi-layer defense requires potentially multiple products or multiple modules to deploy against it, and we can help you understand what are the best things for you to begin this journey, as Gabrielle talked about, of trying to do a better job of protecting and reducing your risk of malware and more specifically ransomware. Now, this document that I mentioned earlier about a new ebook here, it's posted on our website. It's titled "How Malware is Reshaping IBMI Security and the Rules Have Changed." It follows a lot of the information you heard today and what goes deeper in some areas as well.
Sorry, could you say that again?
But very much a C-level document or a C-suite document that can be digested. It's not designed, it's not technical, it's not, step by step, here's how you do it. It's much more about the evolving landscape, what you should be thinking about, the challenges that they have. So I encourage you to download this. Everyone will get a copy of the recording here, and the link you can see there is at the bottom, and that'll take you right to the page on the website where you can access this document. So we've got just a few minutes left here. Let me see what we can address here from the Q&A that has come in. Gabrielle, I guess the question really is, so the attack here would be from another host, most likely, say, a Windows system that's under command and control of the intruders. I think that's getting at that issue of how does the malware get onto the IBMI in the first place via the IFS. So I think the short answer is yes, it's most likely coming from an infected PC that exists in the network. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah. So in other words, it's either an infected PC that has access to a network share, or if you're up against a more troubling adversary, it's it's someone who purloined one of those credentials that was flying across. It was, and I say someone. It could also just be scripted code. So those are the two. Those are the two main points of entry that we see.
Okay, excellent. Here's a quick answer to a question, but I think it's a really important question. I just popped up a screen a few minutes ago that showed all the different modules that are part of Assure Security and how they can be sort of organized and deployed against different problems like access control and more specifically today, the malware piece. And the question is, do you have to purchase the entire Assure security offering, or can you get specific modules? And the answer to that question is specific modules. And in fact, just to be as transparent as possible, most of our customer engagements don't start with somebody buying the entire suite. They start with a particular module or set of modules to address one of those problem sets, and then we find that they actually, over time will purchase additional modules. But generally, people don't purchase everything all at once. And again, to call back to what Gabrielle said a minute ago, it is a journey. So it's, what do you want to start with? And one of the things you may have heard us talk about before, and I'll use this opportunity to reiterate it, a lot of times we see people that get paralyzed by just the amount of, oh my gosh, there's all this stuff, what should I do first? Wow, this is a really big problem. I'm not sure exactly how to get from, my problem today to a solution. And it paralyzes them, and they don't take the first step. And so we really like to encourage customers to find something that you think you can, improve and make better, take that step, and then take the next step. Don't get paralyzed by the broad scope of, the security challenge. Find out, what you can attack and try to attack that, and the thing that makes the most sense for your company. So, again, purchase individual modules is generally the way we work with people. Let's see. I have a couple here that are nice comments. Thank you for a bunch of those, but they're not necessarily questions. I have a question here about someone upgrading from the old Silosoft versions of the product to Assure. We will reach out to you after this specifically on that and contact you about how we can help you with that. Curious. Here's a good question, and I'll be honest. Do we have any real life customer stories that we've published that have IBM focused malware thing? We don't. Not to say we haven't run into those kind of issues with customers, but we when a customer goes public and publishes a case study like that, they're putting their name on something, and there can be a reluctance. Understandable reluctance for people to talk about their security situation in those. So we don't have a particular customer who's stuck. We can generally talk to you about situations we've seen in an anonymous sort of fashion, but we don't have a published case study on that particular topic. So
yeah, and I think, Bill, we might have one or two anonymous case studies, not from our own customer base, but from situations in the industry that happened that targeted the IBM, of course, not using the real organization's name.
Right. Okay. Yeah, there's a few other ones. Like I said, anyone whose question got entered and didn't get answered, we will get back to you. We follow up with you on these after the webinar. So thank you for putting those in there. We really appreciate your time today. I want to thank Gabrielle, as I said, for kind of pinch hitting in the 11th hour here to jump in on this, but I think his perspective was tremendously valuable on this. So thanks, Gabrielle. I appreciate it, and I appreciate the time that all of you invested today to attend the webinar with us. I hope you come back and listen to another one or see us again, and I will wish you a very good day, and we'll sign off now. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thanks, Bill and Gabrielle, for putting together a really informative presentation and for all your insights in the Q&A there. We really appreciate your time today. And again, if you'd like to find out more about Precisely or get started, check out the link in the handout section. Also, I put the link to the ebook that Bill mentioned in the Q&A window, so you can grab that link from there as well. So before we wrap up, we have one more piece of business. It's the $300 Amazon gift card prize drawing. And the winner of the $300 Amazon gift card is Brandon San Miguel from Texas. So congratulations to Brandon. We'll be in touch to get you your card. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank Precisely for making this event possible. And thanks as always for attending and for all of your great questions today. That concludes this event. Have a great rest of your day.